Welcome to this video on how to set up Kobo Collect Module 3.4 in the Data for Human Rights curriculum. Let's start by navigating to the kobotoolbox.org. You can either create an account from the home page or go to sign up and you'll see create an account. You'll need a working email to create this account. I'm going to sign in because I've already created my account, and I'm going to sign in with the Data for Human Rights login. Let me quickly orient you to what you're looking at before we jump into developing our first form. There's two major areas on the left. The first is projects, where you manage your forms or your surveys. So survey form is analogous with a project. And there's also something called a library, where you can save questions from your forms and then reuse them in the future. Also, if you archive a form, which I'll explain in a second, it will become available in this library. So let's go back to our projects page. What you'll see under this button for creating a new form are three types of forms. Deployed forms, which are active, and you see those listed here. Those are ones that can be synced from a mobile device and used in the field. There's also a category for draft projects and archive projects, or projects that you've retired and are not going to be active and usable in the field, but are still on file for you to reference. You can still borrow questions from them or bring them back from the dead and reactivate them in a year from now, for example. We are going to create a new form by clicking on the new button. And we're going to build this form from scratch. So you have to give the project or a form a name. This is going to be an area observation survey. I'll call it demo. You also need to state the sector and the country where this form is being deployed. And now we create our project. You can see in the upper left, the project or the survey is called Area Observation Survey Demo. And right now there are no questions. So let's quickly orient ourselves here. You could add questions from an existing library if you wanted to borrow questions from a previous form that you've created. But we are going to start by putting our own questions in. So I'm just going to use this plus symbol to add a new question. We're going to start with our team ID. We'll add that question, and you'll see that we're given a bunch of different question format options. For our purposes, team ID is a select one. And here we're going to put all the category labels that we want to appear in the phone. So we're going to call this team A, team B, etc. We're only going to enter a few of these, and if you want to add more categories, you click on the gray area. And what's interesting about Kobo is that these names will automatically appear in your data set, team A, team B, etc., as it's written here on the left. But if you wanted to simplify this so that your data set later on comes in a little bit cleaner, you can change the value, the XML value, of how it will appear in the data set, or like the Excel file at the end. So you just might want to double click here, and you could change this to see A, B, C, D for simplicity. All right, so we're done with our first question. Well, almost done. Sorry, let me introduce you to the tools that are on the top right. This will show up with every single question. You could delete the question. You could duplicate the question if you have two questions that are quite similar. You can add it to the library so you have it for future reference, and you can just, rather than retyping it in a future, you just use the question as it's set up here. And the cog at the top will give you some detailed options for this question. The first bit that we're seeing are question options, and I want you to change it from not mandatory or no to yes, a mandatory response. The other options include skip logic, which I'll talk about in a second, and validation, so that you can make sure that they only enter valid responses here. You don't have to worry about this too much with predefined responses like we have. So I'm going to close that out, and our question is done. Now it's time to add our next question, which is a GPS point. And we simply just hover over that little plus sign until it turns blue and push plus again. Here we're going to say GPS point location. I'll add that question and look for the point format. And honestly, it's that simple. We just have to make this mandatory in the settings. We don't want people to collect a survey without their point location. That's simple. Let's add our third question. This question is about how many buildings do you see from your current location? And you'll see up here that we have a number option. So they're just going to enter a number. So we'll put number. And we just have to make sure that this is a required question, mandatory response, and exit out. So we're done with that question. Now, question number 3 is a select all that apply. And it's asking for which type of buildings do you see from this location? Select all that apply is called select many in Kobo Collect. And here we're going to enter all the different options. You'll notice as I was typing that I misspelled sometimes, and then I went and deleted it manually, but the computer didn't tell me when I was having a spelling error. So this is something to be mindful of when you're providing predefined responses, is you'll want to have somebody look over your form after you've typed it and just make sure there's no spelling errors. Another thing I'll mention, similar to our first question, which was related to team ID and we had to specify different categories, you can also change or simplify the value as it will appear inside of your data set. For example, empty building or with, for example, construction, you might not want all of that in there. So you might just double click here and put empty, and that's how it will show up in your data set. And we're also going to make sure that this is a required question. Now, for the purposes of this lecture, I'm going to show you another question that's not in our assignment, but just imagine under this question, we have several different types of buildings and we have an other category. Let's say that we want to know what that other type of building is. We could add another question and only show this question to the data collector if they have selected other. And so we can click this. We'll make this a text question because they have to type it in and say, what other type of building do you see? We'll add that question as a text, and then we'll go to our settings, but we'll go here to skip logic, and we'll add a condition and only show, this question will only be displayed if the following conditions apply. And so we'll select from an existing question, the building types, equals other. And so now with this condition in place, this what other types of buildings do you see will only appear on the form if somebody has collected other in the previous question. Otherwise, it will just skip to the next question. I hope that makes sense. Okay, and then our last question from our assignment is to photograph the building. Photograph the buildings, plural, I should say. Let's add this as a question, and the format will be as a photo. All right, I'm going to add something called a question hint. You can see all of these have the option for a question hint. If you don't type anything, it will be blank and nicely formatted, but you have the option to type some additional instructions here, and I want these photographs to be horizontal, wide format only. I don't want any vertical photographs. And we'll make sure this is a required question by going to our settings and make it a mandatory response. All right, so that we've actually entered all of the questions that we want for our survey. Let's tidy this up. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this question that was just for demonstration purposes. We don't want this to show in our actual form. So what other types of buildings do you see? I'm going to come over here and delete that question. It's going to double check that I want to do that, and I say yes. So here are the 5 questions in our form. Let's save this and close out of the form editing window. We're back on our main screen where we're looking at our deployed forms 3. Those are the ones I had when we started. And now we have one draft form. That one draft form is what we're looking at here in the main screen. And if you want to make this public, it says you must deploy the form. So we have not deployed it yet. Therefore, our data collectors won't be able to see this, and they won't be able to download it to their phone and start using it. So now we're going to go ahead and deploy. Great. And you'll see that the data collection method that's being specified here is online or offline with multiple submissions. You can change this. I would recommend you leave it as it is, because generally speaking, we want it to work offline. It's no problem if it also works online. And what it's saying is that we want multiple submissions for this form to be allowed. So a data collector can go to multiple areas and fill out an observation form for each one and submit them. You can also have a quick look by using this I button. It shows up in a few other screens throughout Kobo Toolbox. While this form doesn't look quite like it will on the tablet or phone, it is helpful for having a quick look and just making sure that the questions behave how you expect them to. So you can actually click through this and test it. Like if I've clicked one of the team names here, but if I unclick it and I try to leave this blank, it will give me an error saying this field is required. So things are working as we expect. The GPS points work differently on a phone, so I won't demonstrate that, but here we can enter numbers. I can't enter letters. See, I'm trying to enter a letter, it doesn't work, only numbers. I can click multiple boxes here, this is good, and I can upload a photograph, or in the field, I'll be able to take this photograph. And I'm seeing the little message, horizontal wide photos only. So things look good to me. I can validate it. It's telling me, okay, if I was in the field and I tried submitting this, it wouldn't work, which is to be expected because we left things like the GPS blank. So things are helpful to just double check real quick before you deploy. If you do make any changes, you'll see that you can always redeploy. Let me quickly show you this languages option. Right now it says there's no languages defined yet for this project or this survey, but you can actually set up some translations using Google Translate. So let's click on this globe item over here. The default language at the moment is English. So let's set that. It's asking for what the default language code is. And they give us a lookup for it. So let me right click that and open it up in another window. And I'll do a quick word search for English. Let me copy that. It's just EN. That's how it's summarizing English. So that's the default code. Let's say I also want to set this form up in Yoruba. So let me add a language and let's search for that language. Let me go back to my word search, find Yoruba. And YO is the short code for that. So let's put in that language code, add it. So now data collectors have the option to deliver this survey in English or in Yoruba, where English is the default. We can also check the translations or actually create translations for this. So at the moment, there's no translations showing up in this survey. We've got the original string as we typed it into our survey, and right now there's no text here. All right, I've entered some text that's just garbled at the moment, but imagine that these are the translations for each of the items in the original string. This will now show up in the Yoruba version of the questionnaire. Let's save our changes at the bottom. Now that we've defined another language other than English for our survey, let us have a look at what that would look like from the data collector's perspective. So again, we're going to click on this little eye preview button. And even though this isn't exactly how it'll appear on the tablet or phone, we get an idea. This is our survey, but they have a little option up here to choose language. And so they could switch over to Yoruba if they were interviewing somebody who only speaks Yoruba. So now we're going to redeploy, let's say. Let's redeploy. It can't be undone. Okay, no worries. And you'll see with each redeployment that we get a new version of the survey. You can go to the full history here and see the previous versions of this survey that were deployed. You can always roll back to a previous version. Now I want to show you the data tab, but of course we don't have any data yet in this survey for me to show you. So let me show you for a survey where I've already made some fake data. what that tab looks like. We'll click on the Data tab, and it starts with a table. This is the raw data as it was submitted from our data collectors in the field. So we have our few questions. At the very end is metadata. These are all variables or columns that are collected automatically, and they all start with an underscore to show that they are not part of your survey. They're just automatically collected, and they include things like submission time and date. Let me go back to the beginning and show you that there's also this validation column at the beginning. And this I find very helpful for data management when data are being submitted by multiple people over multiple days. And you might be reviewing the data as it comes in. And some of it is what you consider clean data. It's ready to go. And there might be some that come in that are problematic, and you need to follow up with the data collectors or even toss out this data altogether. So you might be reviewing this, looking at the values. Are they sensible values? You might be looking at the photographs that they send in and say, oh, this photograph makes sense or it doesn't make sense for this survey. You might be looking at the GPS points on a map. I'll show you that in a second. And if anything's incorrect, you probably wouldn't want to keep it. But if it all looks correct, you can approve that record by clicking on the little drop-down arrow. And this will keep track of all the data that you've reviewed and approved, or maybe you approve it, review it, and then you put it on hold because you need to follow up with the data collector. You can also mark not approved and then delete these records later because they're basically garbage and not usable as part of your data. Let's look at the other options here. You can look at all of that table data summarized in visual reports or graphs. We have 3 teams submitting data with 2 forms completed from each team. If we go down, how many buildings do you see from current location? We see the average and some other statistics. What types of buildings do you see from your current location? Each of the categories is given a bar on this chart, and it's also summarized below in this table. And here in the photographs of buildings, you get all the JPEG images that were uploaded. If you wanted to see these pictures, you can go over here to the gallery. And you can see I've just uploaded some random pictures from the internet that are just sitting here, but you can see a summary of all the images that were uploaded. Were they all horizontal? Did you get some vertical ones? Let's say you were looking at your table and you're finding it a little bit challenging to do some data cleaning here, and you want to take it into Google Sheets or Excel and do some more data analysis. So you want to download this as an Excel file. We'll come down here to downloads, and you'll see that there's an export type called XLS. You can also download the GPS points and as a KML file and open it in Google Earth. And there's other options here to explore as well. We'll leave the default Excel, and we're going to export that. What it's doing is creating a file that we can download. You can see it's processing, and then it now made it available to download. I also did this earlier, so there's a previous download available. Let's download this one, and we can open it directly in Excel or Google Sheets. And the last thing I want to show you is the map option. I've been doing this from my home in the US, so you'll see a bunch of dots in just one place, but hopefully if you were seeing data collectors out in various locations doing area observations, they'd be scattered all around a neighborhood. And so you can check and just make sure that those GPS points are coming in and making sense. The last thing I'll show you is settings. If you wanted to archive this project or put it away for record keeping, but you don't want it to be active anymore, you can always archive this project. Archiving it, which I'll do right now, takes it out of deployment. It's no longer active. People can't use it, but it's available here in this archive form. Let's go back to our area observation survey, which is still deployed and active. And let me show you quickly, by clicking on the 3 dots, you can share this project. This is helpful if you are working with other people to create the form, edit the form, do data management as data are coming in, and you want somebody to clean the data, or you've got people working on translations into other languages. You might add some other user accounts. You have to enter their user ID here, and you can also limit what they can do. So that's a brief overview of how to set up a Kobo Collect form in Kobo Toolbox. I wish you all the best with your surveys.